Well, in 2005, an Israeli archaeologist announced to the world that she had uncovered the ruins of King David's palace in Jerusalem.
There are moments in history when the ground beneath our feet cracks open and swallows everything we thought we knew. This is one of those moments. Deep beneath the ancient hills of Jerusalem, sealed behind engineered stone barriers, protected by mechanisms that outlasted entire civilizations, a chamber sat untouched for 5 millennia. And when archaeologists finally breached that final threshold, what they found did not just confirm legends, it exploded them. We are talking about the tomb of King Solomon, one of the most sought-after archaeological sites in human history. For generations, scholars argued about whether Solomon even existed as a historical figure or whether he was purely a creation of religious mythology. Today, that argument is over. What was pulled from beneath those limestone layers has left the academic world speechless, and frankly, the rest of us should be paying very close attention. So settle in, because this story deserves your full attention from beginning to end. To understand why this discovery carries such extraordinary weight, you first need to understand who Solomon was and why his memory has survived for 3,000 years across 3 of the world's major religions. Solomon ruled the United Kingdom of Israel roughly between 970 and 931 BCE. He was the son of King David, the shepherd boy turned warrior king, whose own story reads more like an epic novel than a historical record. But if David was the warrior, Solomon was the philosopher king. Ancient texts describe him as a ruler of unparalleled wisdom, a man who could see through deception the way sunlight cuts through shallow water. The biblical account of 2 women, both claiming the same infant child, remains one of the most psychologically astute judicial decisions ever recorded. By offering to divide the child with a sword, Solomon identified the true mother through her instinctive sacrifice. That single story has been analyzed by legal scholars, psychologists, and theologians for centuries. Beyond wisdom, Solomon presided over what ancient sources unanimously describe as an era of breathtaking wealth and cultural sophistication. The construction of the first temple in Jerusalem, undertaken around 957 BCE, represented an architectural and spiritual achievement that defined Israelite civilization. Ancient records describe walls lined with cedar wood imported from Lebanon, surfaces overlaid with gold, and an inner sanctuary housing the Ark of the Covenant itself. Solomon's trading networks reportedly stretched from Arabia to Africa to the distant shores of Ophir, a location historians still debate to this day. His legacy did not stop at borders or religious lines. In Islamic tradition, Suleiman is recognized as a prophet and king granted dominion over wind, animals, and spiritual forces. In Jewish mystical tradition, the seal of Solomon carries protective power, still referenced in modern symbolism. In Christian theological history, Solomon's temple represents a foundational image of divine dwelling on earth. A man whose influence radiates this powerfully across millennia was either the greatest legend ever constructed, or a figure of genuine and remarkable historical substance. The recent discovery suggests very firmly that it is the latter. The hunt for Solomon's tomb is not a new obsession. Explorers, treasure hunters, religious pilgrims, and serious archaeologists have been searching for physical traces of Solomon's reign for well over a century. The challenge was always the same. Jerusalem is arguably the most archaeologically layered city on earth. Beneath its streets lie the remnants of Crusader fortifications, Byzantine churches, Roman temples, Hellenistic structures, and beneath all of that, the deep strata of the Iron Age world Solomon would have inhabited. Previous attempts to locate Solomon's burial site were frustrated by political sensitivities around excavation near the Temple Mount, limited technology, and the stubborn silence of the historical record on where exactly Solomon was laid to rest. The books of Kings state simply that Solomon was buried in the city of David, but that designation covers a broad area, and generations of subsequent construction have buried, destroyed, and rearranged that landscape repeatedly. What changed in recent years was a combination of factors. Ground-penetrating radar technology reached a level of precision that allowed researchers to detect not just empty spaces underground, but the density and composition of materials beneath the surface. Satellite imaging capable of identifying subtle geometric anomalies in terrain began flagging locations that did not match the natural geological profile of the Jerusalem hills. And crucially, a team of archaeologists began cross-referencing these technological findings with ancient administrative texts that had been largely overlooked, records of tribute payments and ceremonial processions that pointed repeatedly toward a specific region southwest of the traditional city of David boundaries. The excavation that followed was painstaking. The team encountered engineered stone barriers, clearly designed to resist exactly the kind of intrusion they were attempting. These were not natural formations. The precision of the cuts, the deliberate placement of false tunnels, and the layered defensive architecture all pointed to builders who understood that what they were protecting would be worth stealing. That realization alone was a significant finding. Whoever buried Solomon went to extraordinary lengths to keep him hidden. When the team finally identified the primary entrance to the tomb complex, the challenge shifted from finding it to opening it without destroying what lay inside. The sealed stone door they faced was not a simple slab. Analysis revealed a counterweight and pressure point system of considerable ingenuity. 7 distinct activation points needed to be engaged in a specific sequence. Trigger them in the wrong order, and a cascade mechanism would collapse the passage permanently. The team spent weeks modeling the system using three-dimensional reconstruction software before attempting any physical intervention. They consulted experts in ancient Hebrew engineering, mathematicians familiar with numerical systems from the Iron Age period, and structural engineers who could assess how the mechanism might have degraded over 5,000 years. The actual opening process, conducted with tools designed to apply measured, precise pressure without damaging the stone, took several days. When the door finally moved, the sound it made, ancient gears and counterweights grinding back to life after millennia of stillness, was reportedly unlike anything the team members had ever heard. Several described it later as genuinely emotional. One archaeologist on the team said it felt less like opening a door and more like receiving an answer to a question humanity had been asking for 3,000 years. What greeted them on the other side was air that had not circulated since the Iron Age, and beyond that air, darkness filled with things that should not have survived. The tomb complex consists of multiple chambers arranged in a deliberate sequence, and even the outermost room contained findings significant enough to rewrite textbooks. The walls bore murals in a state of preservation that conservation experts described as nearly inexplicable given the time frame. The pigments retained their color with a vividness that suggested the environment inside had maintained near-perfect stability for the entire period of the tomb ceiling. Among the first objects documented were ceremonial vessels of solid gold, their surfaces engraved with ancient Hebrew text identifying their ritual purpose and the specific occasions on which they were used. The craftsmanship displayed in these objects exceeded what archaeologists had previously attributed to Iron Age Israelite metalworking. The precision of the engraving, the purity levels of the gold itself, and the structural integrity of the vessels after 5,000 years all pointed to a level of technical sophistication that demands serious reconsideration of what we think we know about ancient Israelite civilization. Personal artifacts were found alongside the ceremonial objects. A seal ring bearing markings consistent with historical descriptions of Solomon's royal seal was recovered from a small stone shelf near the entrance to the inner chamber. Scrolls sealed within copper cylinders had survived in readable condition, and initial translations indicated these were not standard royal proclamations, but personal writings, reflections on governance, justice, human nature, and the limitations of earthly power. The echoes of Ecclesiastes in these unpublished texts were immediately noted by biblical scholars, brought in to assist with translation. Trade goods from distant civilizations were documented throughout the chambers. Fragments of silk consistent with Chinese origin, ivory carvings bearing stylistic markers from sub-Saharan Africa, and sealed ceramic containers holding organic residues from spices native to the Indian subcontinent collectively painted a picture of a trading network of genuinely global reach. For those who had questioned whether Solomon's commercial empire was historical fact or literary exaggeration, these objects provided a direct, physical answer. One of the most discussed finds was a bronze mechanical device recovered from a side chamber. The object features interlocking components and calibrated markings in ancient Hebrew that researchers believe may represent an early astronomical calculation instrument. If this interpretation holds after further analysis, It would push the documented history of mechanical astronomical tools back by several centuries and force a fundamental revision of assumptions about ancient scientific development in the Levant. The walls of the inner chambers are covered in inscriptions, and the translation work currently underway is expected to take years. What has been deciphered so far is already generating intense scholarly debate. A series of texts on the eastern wall appear to be personal prayers and meditations composed by Solomon himself, or at least attributed to him by those who prepared the tomb. The theological content is nuanced and in some places surprisingly candid, reflecting a ruler wrestling with the contradictions of power, wealth, and spiritual responsibility. These texts complement and in some places challenge the canonical portrayal of Solomon in existing scripture, not by contradicting it outright, but by adding dimensions and complexities that religious tradition did not preserve. Astronomical charts etched into the ceiling of the main chamber have been cross-referenced with star positions calculable for the 10th century BCE, and the precision of these charts is extraordinary. They suggest a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics that was being applied practically, likely for agricultural and ceremonial calendar purposes, but with a level of mathematical rigor that places ancient Israelite astronomy in a new category entirely. Diplomatic correspondence preserved on several wall panels includes references to communication with Egypt, Phoenicia, and kingdoms further afield. Some of these references describe agreements and events not recorded in any existing historical source, opening entirely new avenues of research into the geopolitics of the ancient Near East. The implications of this discovery extend far beyond archaeology. At the most fundamental level, the physical confirmation of Solomon's historical existence and the material evidence of his kingdom's sophistication changes the framework within which billions of people understand their own religious and cultural heritage. 3 of the world's major faiths carry Solomon's legacy within their foundations. What was mythology for some and faith for others is now, in significant measure, verifiable history. For the scientific community, the tomb's contents challenge existing models of ancient technological development. The mechanical device, the astronomical charts, the advanced metallurgy, the architectural engineering of the tomb itself. Each of these demands that historians reconsider the pace and geography of human intellectual progress. The assumption that sophisticated scientific and engineering knowledge, developed primarily along 1 or 2 historical tracks, may need to be substantially revised. For the field of conservation science, the preservation methods employed in the tomb's construction represent a subject of intense current study. How organic materials, including textiles, wooden objects, and sealed organic compounds, survived 5,000 years in this condition is a question with practical implications for modern preservation practices. And for the broader public, this discovery carries a different kind of significance. It is a reminder that the past is never as settled as we assume. Beneath the familiar surface of history, beneath the stories we have inherited and the explanations we have accepted, there are chambers still sealed, waiting. Every so often, the ground gives way, and everything changes. King Solomon reportedly wrote that there is nothing new under the sun, but standing at the threshold of his tomb, looking into 5,000 years of preserved darkness, the archaeologists who made this discovery would likely argue otherwise. Sometimes, what is oldest turns out to be the most surprising thing of all. The work of analyzing, translating, and understanding what has been found will continue for decades. New findings will emerge, interpretations will be debated, and our understanding will keep evolving. But one thing is already settled. Solomon was real, his kingdom was remarkable, and the wisdom that made him legendary apparently extended even to how he arranged his own farewell to the world. The tomb is open, the secrets are speaking, and we are only just beginning to listen.